So in February 17th, 2014, my wife and I are watching the Olympics, watching ice dancing, no less. And it's just watched America win gold. And it was like 11 o'clock at night. Wood stoves going off in the corner. And we start hearing this cracking sound. And we think it's the roof, the ceiling above us. It's an exposed beam type structure. And we think it's collapsing on us from the weight of the snow because we just got 10 inches of wet, heavy snow that day. We just hear this crack, crack, and it wasn't the room. Dust started shaking off the ceiling, and we went into, after it stopped, I was like, what happened? And I walked into our entryway, and I remember walking to the front door, and I could see outside. The front of the house had been pushed away, and it was our garage that was attached to the house that collapsed. In that, we ended up living in a friend's house, and then we moved into a hotel for 36 days. And from there, we moved into a 2-bedroom cottage that I found down the street from our house with 4 kids, an old English sheepdog, and my wife and I. It's a lot of people to be in this little cottage, and we were there for months.
At that point, I was a homesteading mom. We had chickens and sheep. I had no more animals, so my homesteading dreams and raising our kids with animals that I thought would be just inevitable was gone. I was a housewife, no home. I was a homeschooler, no home. I felt like my whole life had just collapsed with a roof.
I remember walking outside the cottage, and I'm screaming as I'm walking by myself. I'm like, God, where the F are you? And I didn't say F, and I was ticked. I'm just so upset. Nothing's working out. Our house isn't being fixed. It's not being touched.
I am not in a good place, and I know I'm not in a good place, and I'm telling almost anyone that will listen to me that I am not okay.
And meanwhile, my wife is going and seeing this prayer minister, and she gives her a book about some things we need to pray about, and some of it had to do with secrets. And so she woke me up and she asked me, have you been unfaithful to me? And she's asked this several times before in our marriage. And I had lied for years. And this time I still lied, but I told a half-truth. And I told her, yes, I've been unfaithful. But what she didn't know is that I had been unfaithful countless times, hundreds of times. It was a rough night, and from there, the next day, I had some friends who said, we don't believe you. I called them up and told them, and they said, we don't believe you. They're like, we want to meet with you. And thank God these men did that for me, 3 guys. They met with me, and I most was afraid that my wife would be done with me, that my marriage would be over, that everybody in my life would reject me. One of the guys who is like a dad to me now, he said, Seth, I can handle anything but you lying. So don't lie to me. As best as I could remember at the time, I told them where I'd been, what I'd done. And they told me I had to go home and tell my wife. And not that I ever advocate that anymore. I believe in full disclosure, and that needs to be a therapeutic handling of that. But this is my story.
I left the house with the kids and came back, and he was outside. And I could just tell all over his body language. He was just hunched over by the fire. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be bad. So I had asked the kids to go into the house and to lock the doors. And so I went up and I was like, what have you done? What have you done?
My wife had a visceral reaction. She went through huge trauma. My kids were crying, I was crying, I was numb.
Now, mind you, there's no curtains, so this is a full-blown, episode in front of them. Screaming, I was hitting him, and he leaves, and he forgets one of his books by John Aldridge that he had been diligently reading. I take the book, Epic, it's a little book, and I threw it at him, and it hits his head, and he's bleeding. And now I cannot throw to save my life. So I sincerely still believe that an angel took that book and delivered it, but it was bad because the kids are watching.
I lived in my car for the night at a friend's house because he wouldn't even let me in the house. He's like, I don't even know you. One of the guys he goes, I don't know you, so I can't trust you in my house.
And then I fled to Ohio, terrified. I do not know who this monster is. I was already really traumatized by the house. And at this point, I had very little to lose. And I kicked into hypervigilant mode. I withdrew money out of the savings account. I had everything transferred into an account that he could not touch. I tried to get him arrested because I reasoned that how would I ever talk to another woman if I didn't do everything within my power to put this monster where he belongs. That was a really, really brutal season for me. I distinctly remember the day that I did not say I hate my life over 10 times that day. Over and over again. That was what I said over and over again.
And from there, I got in a journey of recovery. I got worked with a counselor who's a pastor who has gone through this, and he helped me start figuring out how I got here, how I got into pornography, how I was using it to numb out my pain and to deal with the pain that I've experienced in my life. Some of those pains I learned over the next few years was childhood sexual abuse. I had 3 different people in my life abuse me, and it was hard. I had found out that I had dissociative tendencies from those, not ones that I blacked out, but I had what's called co-consciousness. And as those things started healing, I was starting to integrate back my personalities and lessen the desire for acting out.
At that point, I had already jumped into recovery, and he was in recovery. Every 6 months was an evaluation. I was like, I can do 6 months. I don't know if I can do more than 6 months. But we could talk. We were civil. He didn't feel like a threat. He didn't feel dangerous to the children, which is my main concern. He didn't feel dangerous to me. And so we could cohabitate. And if we were sleeping in the same bed, then I knew where he was. Some women feel like God is asking them to stay. I not once felt that. I felt from the very beginning that I have the ability to choose, that Jesus gave me the ability to choose, and that he would support me whatever I decided.
Shame is a killer. Shame is what kept me in the dark. Shame was the constant companion that attacked my identity. It told me that I was worthless. Shame said, you'll never get out of this. This is just who you are. Shame would make me non-relational, make me not be able to connect with others, hide, not be vulnerable. It wasn't until I started learning my identity, who I was in Jesus, that Jesus defines me, no one else. Jesus defines me. I remember when my brother found out where I'd been, he called me that morning, and he said to me, I'm hearing all these rumors about what you've done. And I told him the truth. And I remember freaking out. And I remember driving up Hall Street, and I remember Jesus saying, Seth, my reputation is your reputation. And I remember sitting there going, okay, I'm holding on to you because you're my reputation. I don't need to be worried about anybody else thinking about me or whatever people assume about me. You are my reputation.
A big shift happened when I was once again praying, and I heard the same words again. Like, Haley, you have the ability to choose, and you're going to be blessed either way, because at the end of it, Jesus is my reward. Seth is not my reward. Jesus is my reward. So I'm winning either way. And it felt like freedom to give him another chance, because even if he did hurt me again, I wasn't losing my reward.
Don't go to your wife and tell her all your stuff. It's so traumatic. It can cause PTSD. It's going to cause trauma no matter what. You're going to need to get professional help. You're going to need someone who can walk you both. She's going to need help with her counselor. You're going to need help with your counselor. And they're going to need to work together with you in a way that they can therapeutically help you walk through this.
Where I am at today is the exact opposite of where I wanted to be 8 years ago. In fact, this would have been my worst nightmare. I would have said, and I'm sure I said, being married and helping any other couple work through this is the last thing I wanted to do. And in fact, if somebody wants to do it, bless them. Go, feel free. But that's not going to be me. One time I was preparing to share my story with women, and I just looked out the window of my house, and I about cried, because if it did not collapse the way that it did, I would not want to know where I would be if I didn't get the help I needed.
It was worth the risk to come out in the open. It was worth the risk to bring what was done in the darkness into the light. Because whatever is done in the darkness, when it comes to light, God makes it light. My wife and I have been married for over 20 years. We renewed our vows in the summer of 2018.
We're still married. We still have married problems. Some are what I call regular married problems. Now everything is like, it has a term, is a regular married problem or an addiction problem, and we have regular problems and some like addiction trigger problems that we talk through regularly. I don't know if those will ever go away, but we have a lot of fun together. Seth and I are friends, which I feel like is a bigger miracle than our marriage. There's a lot of people that are married that aren't friends.
We have our ups and downs still. We're working through things. But she's my best friend. We weren't friends before, now we're friends. Now we have fun. Now we enjoy each other. And it's an adventure, and we get to do it together, and I love it. I love that, and I love to be able to raise my kids and teach them to be relational and connected and express their feelings and talk through them and listen to them. Before, that would overwhelm me. It doesn't do that anymore. I can't say that. There's moments it does, but it's not like it used to be. And so it's hugely important to know what your story is, to know what your trauma is, to know what your pain is. I've come to learn that sexual addiction is not the problem, and I'm not saying it's not a problem, it's a problem, but it's not the problem. Just like drug addiction, it isn't the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. And the problem is we have deep pains, deep things in our story that we need to get worked through, and we need community. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's community. And the more community we can develop and grow in, the more, and the space that we can have where we know we are loved and we know people enjoy us and we enjoy them, we grow, we get healthy, we can share, we can be vulnerable, we can learn to what it means to be vulnerable. We can learn what it means to feel, know what our feelings are. Most of us don't even know what our feelings are. You know, most guys I know, they don't know how to feel. They don't know what their emotions are. And to know those things are what we need to learn and grow. And that's what I've learned on my journey. How to feel, how to express those feelings, and how to help other guys to do the same.